trapped. Life in Gaza, under siege. Gaza, a narrow strip of land along the Mediterranean coast, is home to over 2 million Palestinians. For years, Gaza has been under Israeli siege, its borders tightly controlled. The situation is dire. People struggle to find food, clean water, and basic necessities. Movement is restricted, opportunities limited. The weight of the siege hangs heavy, casting a long shadow over every aspect of life in Gaza. The Gaza Strip is one of the most densely populated places on Earth. With limited land and resources, residents are crammed into overcrowded neighborhoods. Unemployment is rampant. Poverty is widespread, and the future looks bleak. The psychological toll of this ongoing crisis is immeasurable, particularly on children who have known nothing but conflict and deprivation. The international community has long condemned the siege as a form of collective punishment, a violation of international law. Human rights organizations have documented the devastating impact of the blockade on the health, education, and livelihoods of Gazans. Yet, despite the outcry, the siege continues, trapping millions in a cycle of despair and desperation. The border closure, Israel's iron grip. Israel argues that the closure is necessary for its security to prevent weapons smuggling and attacks by Hamas, the militant group that governs Gaza. They point to the rockets fired from Gaza into Israel as justification for their actions. However, critics argue that the blockade is disproportionate and punishes the entire population for the actions of a few. The Rafah crossing, Gaza's only gateway to the outside world, not controlled by Israel, has been largely closed for years. This closure severely restricts the movement of people and goods, choking Gaza's economy and isolating its residents. Patients needing urgent medical care outside Gaza face agonizing delays and often die waiting for permits to cross. Students with scholarships to study abroad see their dreams shattered as they are denied permission to leave. Families are torn apart, unable to visit loved ones or seek opportunities beyond the confines of the besieged enclave. The border closure has turned Gaza into an open-air prison, its residents held captive to a conflict they did not choose.
"We are living in a cage," says Fatima, a young mother of 3, her voice filled with despair. "My children have never known what it's like to live a normal life. They live in constant fear of bombs and have no hope for the future." Fatima's story is not unique. Across Gaza, men, women, and children share similar tales of hardship and resilience. They speak of the daily struggle to survive, to provide for their families, to maintain a semblance of normalcy amidst the rubble and uncertainty. Their voices, often drowned out by the din of conflict, paint a stark picture of life under siege. "We are not asking for much," says Ahmed, a fisherman whose livelihood has been decimated by the restrictions on fishing zones imposed by Israel. "We just want to live in dignity, to have the freedom to move, to work, to raise our children in peace." Their pleas for help, for an end to the blockade, for a chance at a better future, echo throughout the besieged enclave.
Humanitarian crisis. A looming threat. The humanitarian situation in Gaza is dire and deteriorating. The blockade has crippled the economy, leaving the majority of the population dependent on aid. Hospitals are overwhelmed, lacking essential medicines and equipment. The water and sanitation systems are on the verge of collapse, posing a serious threat to public health. The UN has warned of a looming humanitarian catastrophe in Gaza, with potentially devastating consequences for the entire region. They have called for an immediate end to the blockade and for increased international support to address the urgent needs of the Palestinian people in Gaza. The international community must act now to avert a full-blown crisis. The people of Gaza cannot wait any longer. They deserve to live in dignity, with freedom and hope. The world must not turn a blind eye to their plight.
International response: a chorus of condemnation. The international community has widely condemned Israel's blockade of Gaza. The UN has repeatedly called for an end to the siege, deeming it illegal and a form of collective punishment. Human rights organizations have documented the devastating impact of the blockade on the civilian population. The EU has called for an immediate and unconditional opening of all border crossings to allow for the free flow of people and goods. Numerous countries have condemned the blockade as a violation of international law and have urged Israel to lift the restrictions. Despite the widespread condemnation, Israel has so far resisted calls to lift the blockade, insisting that it is necessary for its security. The international community's efforts to pressure Israel have been met with defiance and intransigence. The U.S. stance, a controversial ally. The United States, a long-standing ally of Israel, has faced criticism for its unwavering support for the Israeli government, even in the face of international condemnation of the blockade. While expressing concern for the humanitarian situation in Gaza, the U.S. has often shielded Israel from censure at the UN Security Council. This stance has drawn criticism from many in the international community, who accuse the U.S. of double standards and of prioritizing its relationship with Israel over the human rights of Palestinians. The U.S. argues that it is committed to a two-state solution and that it is working behind the scenes to find a peaceful resolution to the conflict. However, critics argue that the U.S.'s continued support for Israel, including its military aid, emboldens Israel to maintain the status quo and undermines efforts to achieve a just and lasting peace. The U.S.'s role in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict remains a subject of intense debate and controversy.
The United Nations has played a central role in addressing the humanitarian crisis in Gaza and in seeking a peaceful resolution to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. The UN Relief and Works Agency for Palestine Refugees in the Near East, or UMARWA, provides vital assistance to Palestinian refugees in Gaza, including food, healthcare, and education. The UN has repeatedly called for an end to the blockade, urging all parties to respect international law and human rights. The UN Security Council has passed resolutions condemning the blockade and calling for a two-state solution. But these resolutions have often been vetoed by the United States. The UN continues to work towards a just and lasting peace in the region. But its efforts have been hampered by the intransigence of the parties involved and the lack of political will to find a solution.
The ongoing siege of Gaza has far-reaching political implications. It has fueled resentment and anger among Palestinians, undermining trust in the peace process and increasing support for Hamas. The blockade has also strained relations between Israel and its neighbors, as well as with the international community. The humanitarian crisis in Gaza has become a rallying cry for critics of Israel's policies, further isolating Israel on the world stage. The siege has also hampered economic development in the region, as the potential for trade and cooperation between Israel and a viable Palestinian state remains unrealized. The continued blockade of Gaza represents a significant obstacle to peace and stability in the region. It is a powder keg of tension that could ignite at any moment, with potentially devastating consequences for all involved.
Despite the bleak outlook, there are glimmers of hope for a better future for Gaza. The international community's condemnation of the blockade, though largely symbolic, puts pressure on Israel to find a solution. The UN's continued engagement, particularly through UNRWA, provides a lifeline to millions of Palestinians in Gaza. There are also signs of growing fatigue within Israeli society with the status quo, with some voices calling for an end to the occupation and a negotiated settlement with the Palestinians. The changing regional dynamics with the Abraham Accords normalizing relations between Israel and some Arab states could also create new opportunities for dialogue and cooperation. However, these glimmers of hope remain fragile. A lasting solution requires a fundamental shift in the political landscape. a genuine commitment to peace from all parties, and a willingness to make difficult compromises. The situation in Gaza is untenable. The international community cannot stand idly by while millions of people are denied their basic human rights. We must act now to break the cycle of suffering and create the conditions for a just and lasting peace. We must demand an immediate end to the blockade, allowing for the free flow of people and goods into and out of Gaza. We must increase humanitarian aid to address the urgent needs of the Palestinian people in Gaza. We must support efforts to revive the peace process based on a two-state solution that guarantees the security and self-determination of both Israelis and Palestinians. The future of Gaza, and indeed the entire region, hangs in the balance. Let us choose hope over despair, peace over conflict, and justice over oppression. Let us work together to build a future where all people, Israelis and Palestinians alike, can live in dignity, security, and peace.